All right, good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday, August 19th. We'll call the meeting to order. The first item of business today is the approval of the agenda. And we do have two agenda additions. One is request to fill deputy recorder position due to resignation, and the second is award bid for landfill scale project.
I'll move the agenda with the two additions.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same, motion carried. Okay, our next item is citizens to be heard. Do we have any citizens to be heard today, and items not on the agenda? Any citizens to be heard on items not on the agenda? All right, we'll move on. Approval of bills and vouchers.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same, motion carried. Approval of minutes from August 5th and 12th.
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same, motion carried. The 835 item is review guardianship contract with Lutheran Social Services, and we're going to have with us Rhonda Porter, Pat Boyer. Come on up.
We have a number of folks here. So
Okay, well, maybe I'll just let you do some introductions then if you've got...
let's see, we need four.
We got
Actually, five.
five, okay.
We got yeah.
If the ladies would be good enough to speak into the mic.
Yeah, just, Rhonda, we have two microphones for five of you, so we want to make sure that we pass the microphones around and
Share.
speak into the microphones, if you would, please.
All right.
Okay, Rhonda?
Good morning. We have a number of folks with me today to talk about this topic. I think I did allude a little bit to the contract we have with Lutheran Social Services for guardianship conservatorship services during our budget discussion. This was the contract that I had shared with you that we do have some concerns about, where the numbers and referrals into this program have been maximizing the contract, and Lutheran Social Services has been talking with us actually over the past probably 3 years about needing to look at the contract and the rates and the dollars we have attributed to it. And we've tried to work on a number of different things, but we really do need to talk a little bit about the contract and ways we might be able to increase that service. So I do have Roxanne Jenkins with me, with us here today, and Deanna Swenson from LSS. And so what I thought maybe we would do, and Pat and Holly, most of the referrals for this program come out of Pat and Holly's unit, so I asked them to be here as well. And Jenny is quite familiar with these services as well and how they get ordered through the court process. So between all of us, we should be able to answer any question you have. So what I might do is just have Roxanne start a little bit and talk with you about the services they provide, not only for Clay County, but across the state. And then we'll go from there.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having us here today to speak about the Guardianship Options Program at Lutheran Social Service. I really appreciate this opportunity. As you may know, Lutheran Social Service has been around since 1865. It started off with Reverend Norelius going up to Minneapolis to, he had heard that there were some children that were being left at train stations. And so he went up there, collected the children and brought them down and had them adopted into families within his congregation. Thus, LSS started. Over the last 149 years, what we've done basically is we've added programs into communities to help support people to live and contribute in communities, and Guardianship Options is one of those services. Guardianship Options started back in 1988. We started in Duluth with a volunteer program, and quickly learned that we needed to add a little bit of, add some regulations, add some training, and move to some professional supports, because we were finding there's some complexities in terms of being a substitute decision maker for a person. Guardianship is where the court appoints. It's a legal appointment. A petition is made to the court, and the court makes the decision as to whether competency or capacity is an issue, appoints a legal representative. So for guardianship, we make decisions on behalf of the person, so health, abode, relationships, things like that. In the event that they need assistance in the financial area, they don't have capacity or competencies to do so for finances, then a conservator is appointed, same process, but very different powers. The judges and the courts have a very difficult decision in making the determination that a person's rights are going to be removed. And so we honor that very respectfully. We are very careful with how we conduct our role as a substitute decision maker. But we have over 18 persons who are guardians throughout the state of Minnesota for LSS. Our cases are complex. Back even probably 10 years ago, we would see where it was a determination that a person wasn't able to make some health decisions. It usually was an older adult, possibly in a facility, and they couldn't make health decisions. And so a legal representative was needed. And therefore, the courts generally really prefer family members or loved ones, and so do we, because they know the person, they know their values, they know their background, they know how they were making decisions before. In the absence of being able to have that person, or if it's not an appropriate appointment, then LSS has stepped up and then accepted that role. We're not seeing those cases anymore. They're far more complex. There are multiple health issues, multiple diagnoses. There are very complex family dynamics. There's sometimes abuse, fraud, or exploitation that has occurred. You throw this all together, and we go from going and visiting an individual and going to care conferences and maybe having 2 or 3 hours with them a month to working through family issues, working through relationship issues, working and getting better and more appropriate living situations. We now average probably 5+ hours per person a month. It's not uncommon that we will have a person who has very significant episodes, and we're spending upwards of 20 hours a month with the individual. Now for guardianship, and I'll let Deanna speak a little bit here too, because Deanna is our supervisor guardian for this region. She knows more specifically about the cases and how they work, and how we work specifically with our very good partners with Clay County, the case managers and the supervisors. I think that we do have offices, 9 offices throughout the state of Minnesota, so we are able to cover a large region. We consider Clay County part of the Northwest region, of which we have 4 offices now. So we have Bemidji, Monaga, 1 here in Moorhead, and 1 in Fergus. So we've kind of ramped up. And we have seen across the state an increase in the need for guardianship appointments. So anything you'd like to?
I guess the only thing that I would add would give you examples of the things that we've seen that have really increased the hours. Like Roxanne said, years ago, it was the elderly person in a nursing home, and that I'm doing this now for 10 years, and we used to have a higher percentage of those type of people. We don't get those anymore because they are in a supervised setting and they are secure and safe. And generally they have families. Now we're getting a lot more mental illness and a lot of dual diagnosis, which will cause a lot of behaviors. We're getting people who want to stay in the community more, which is wonderful, but it does bring more time that we need to spend to help them to find appropriate housing, supports, and that while they're in the community. So a lot of those things have upped the time that we need to spend with them. And then even if they are in a supervised setting, a lot of times the caregivers want us there more for more meetings because of behaviors and things like that. Other factors, and one of the reasons why the caregivers do is because they have regulations that are, getting more, and they want to make sure that they're in their realm of their regulations and then working in the guardianship role and making sure that both are compatible and working together. So those are just a few of the things that have brought our average number of hours up throughout the years.
And, just a couple of things about what I call the LSS difference. Our guardians are nationally certified. We do have them trained and have them go through the certification process. We follow the National Guardianship Association and the Minnesota Association for Guardianship and Conservatorship, MAGIC, standards of practice. We have staff that serve on local and state and national committees so that we stay fresh on those standards of practice. We pull from the expertise of over 18 to 20 guardians across the state. Believe me, they have seen lots of different kinds of cases, and the ability to share those learnings has been phenomenal. Also, our guardianship options program within LSS is certified through the National Council or National Center on Accreditation, and then we also are able to pull from a large quality oversight from LSS. We get great support from the organization itself when it comes to quality, the financial review, the audits, the internal controls. We feel that that's a significant difference that LSS is able to bring in terms of this particular program and service.
So in the information supplied in the board packet, I did give actually LSS has provided the data in terms of the grid at the bottom there. So talking about the average number of clients they're serving, the service hours, generally the cost per service based on that. So about, currently 76 to 78 is the revised, is the current caseload, and these are all individuals that have been referred by our office at one point or another. And so what I thought is, and this is to put you on the spot, maybe Pat or Holly could talk a little bit about how these cases come into our agency and what factors go into making a decision for guardianship and then ultimate referral to LSS.
Well, we review the referrals at our weekly staff meeting. Generally, there is going to be a case open within social services. It could be a vulnerable adult situation, or it could be an ongoing case that one of our workers is working with. And there's a set of circumstances that may have brought the question to head if this person needs a guardian. And we have a checklist, which is attached. It's the last page of the handout that you received, that we review at the staff meeting to help us determine if this person needs a guardian or not. And before we move forward with that petition, we need the support of that committee or that review team to move forward with that petition. Anything to add, Pat?
Typically, we will get a doctor's supporting statement, and a lot of times it will be a physician that contacts the case manager to say this person needs a guardian because they are unable to make decisions. And then the other thing I just wanted to add to their information was if we have someone that moves to another part of the state, then they will also transfer the case to another one of their LSS offices. So DM is not driving 400 miles to go visit somebody. So that helps too.
So how does the court order process work? How does that fit into this? Like you mentioned earlier, Rhonda, about these are all court order processes.
Correct, and maybe Jenny or Pat can give more information or Holly, but it is a petition then that we submit information to the county attorney's office for a petition for guardianship or conservatorship, and then your office.
Okay, so the process that was just talked about here, that's done first.
Correct.
Okay, and then once all of that's done, then it's reviewed by a judge and an order is given.
Correct.
Okay. Is that Kenny, is that the?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes of social service, which I think Holly and Pat summed up pretty well. And this worksheet, I hadn't seen this before, but this is really kind of neat to see how that works. When the decision is made to make a referral to my office, that information comes over. We prepare a petition. We have usually 2 different hearings, an initial hearing and then a final hearing where we call witnesses and present evidence. And we have to prove that that person is incapacitated. And that means that they're impaired and lack sufficient understanding to make either personal decisions regarding their health and safety or their finances, and they're kind of kept separate, and the court can order one or the other. Guardianship for health and safety or conservatorship for finances, or both. And LSS takes both types of referrals.
So in my reading this document here, I also noticed that, and obviously you're seeking some more funding because it's lacked the necessary funding, which I think you've got a place where you can get it, and which is good. But in that process, I noticed that there was some language in there that says to reduce the waiting list. So by the waiting list, those are people who it hasn't even gotten to a judge, then I'm assuming. Because I would assume once a judge makes an order, it's a done deal. We're doing it, right?
We don't have a choice.
Yeah, we don't have a choice at that time. But so what you're saying then, according to your document here, is some cases are held back from that level because of this funding restriction. Okay. I'm just trying to get the big picture here.
Until it reaches the point of an emergency, and then there really isn't a choice. And
Okay.
LSS has graciously accepted a couple of emergencies, even though there really isn't money.
Okay.
Do you have, is there many times when the judge does not accept your recommendation? Is that pretty, yeah, it's far enough along and serious enough that they normally will move forward, is that right?
Sometimes it's contested.
By others,
Maybe Jenny can talk a
Yeah,
little about that.
I can't think of one recently that we've not been successful at, but I mean, I think it would probably happen, 1 out of 20 or 25 times that we bring a petition to the court, maybe. Sometimes there can be improvement in the interim. Sometimes we file what's called an emergency guardianship, and that's only in order for 60 days. And then we have to file what's called a general petition for guardianship, which would extend it longer. And sometimes in that period between getting the emergency and having a contested hearing on the final guardianship, that person has stabilized because of having LSS in place and making some of these good decisions, that we don't need a long-term guardianship. So, but I think more often than not, when it reaches the point of petitioning to the court, we're at a pretty crucial time, and the court typically sees that and grants our request.
So, which leads me to another question, and that is, how do we ever measure this program's success? In a lot of areas when we do things like that, there's certain areas that we try to do it to reduce recidivism. So how do we measure this as a comparison to, or just something we just need to do, and good, bad, or indifferent, we need to do it? I would hope that we have a way to measure its success.
I think internally LSS probably has a process for that, but one of the things, certainly we're looking for stability, and stability, whether it be medically or in their housing or financial stability. The other thing that probably the numbers don't reflect, and Jenny kind of alluded to this, is we do have people going on and off guardianship or conservatorship services. So the numbers don't necessarily reflect those that go off, and certainly some go off for other reasons. They've either passed away, or certainly that they've their capacity has been restored, or their condition improved. Their condition has improved, or maybe a family member situation has changed and they now can take over that responsibility. One of the things we certainly do is we're always going to look at a relative or another individual that might be in the family to be able to provide this service versus a referral to LSS if that's possible. We always want family members to be involved. But there's some of those situations, and that might be where some of those contested situations occur, where maybe it's a family member who has not been making the best choices for the vulnerable individual, and we become involved and can be contentious at that point. But so,
Frank,
do we as a county do any of this stuff? I mean, ourselves. I mean, you got a big department too. I mean, are we duplicating services, or we do?
Not the guardianship. We could, as a county, we could decide to hire staff and provide this service ourselves. This contract with LSS, we were just talking, has been in place for over 10 years. Pat, do you have a sense? It's been quite a long time. I think that I'm not aware of a lot of counties that do provide this service themselves. I think that it can create some conflict of interest situations because oftentimes we are case managers on their service package, so to speak, if they're on Medicaid waiver, or we might be involved in investigating vulnerable adult situations, so it's a nice separation of duties. But the statute wouldn't prohibit us from serving as that guardian or conservator. It will be more costly for us to hire staff when we look at the average hourly rate, for us to hire staff and provide this service ourselves. So we think the contracting out is a better situation. It's not uncommon, though, that we will have a case manager assigned and working in a different capacity along with the guardian. So,
Well, that's what I was thinking, we're already probably working with this person.
yes, correct. We are. Yeah. We have different responsibilities, different roles, so it's not duplicative in that nature. And I think, as LSS indicated, we are also seeing some real complex, multifaceted issues. It's not just an elderly individual, maybe in a nursing home, that needs some of that decision making. Many of these folks have multiple diagnoses, mental health, chemical health, along with all kinds of other issues. So even with maybe 2 folks involved, it's really needed, and the number of hours that are put into some of these situations is pretty complex.
So when we get down to what you put in your 2015 budget, you're asking for 25,203 in additional funds. What amount of additional abilities do you have from that in terms of clients?
Well,
do you understand my question? How
Yeah.
many more people can we serve out of that?
Right. Well, and that was a conversation we had. The way this contract works is we have a contract amount, and we pay 1/12 of that every month, and they take care of all of our referrals and
Okay.
meet the needs.
Okay.
So the grid kind of calculates out what that average hourly
Okay.
rate has been based on that referral. So we would expect, and certainly LSS could talk about this, but that our referrals, when they're made, are accepted and taken care of. And the
I would
needs met.
assume, and this might go to you two then, I'm assuming that if your revenues from us were increased by that amount, you would be able to take on more
That's
clients.
exactly the conversation that we've had with Rhonda, Pat, and Holly. It has been a matter that we've had to hold off on the referrals because of the financial status. This would kind of lift that somewhat. Just as a matter of reference, we do monitor on a monthly basis all of the client activity, and so the number of hours and the number of clients, and we report that back to Clay County. And we're thinking that on a quarterly basis, no less than, just to touch base to make sure that we know where we're at numbers wise. And previous to my coming to LSS, we would submit a bill for 1/12 of the contract, and we weren't really giving good trend data to the county, to Clay County. Now we changed that, and we've been giving. That's why we've been working on it for 3 years. We have looked at things that maybe we could reduce on our side, work more closely with case managers, maybe get rep payees for certain clients. We've kind of chipped away at a number of things, but the reality is there are more people coming, and there are more hours that are needed, and so. But I think that we have better understanding of what the trends are now after 3 years of data.
With full disclosure, I have to say that I'm a member of the board of directors of LSS, and I really statewide see this is a fantastic program statewide. It really is doing well, and it's serving communities in ways that that just are unquestionable as far as their worth. So I would wholly support this increase, but I am on the board of directors, so it may be that I shouldn't vote on such a thing. But we wouldn't vote on that now anyway. I presume it would be part of the budget.
Yes. Well, unless we need a contract is there a contract deadline on this?
No, however, there's kind of two parts to this presentation today. The first part is to ask for additional funds to be attributed to the contract for 2014. And I did provide in the board packet where those funds would come from in the 2014 budget. And then the second part is just reiterating that I had included an additional $25,000 in the 2015 budget, which I assumed would get acted upon as you move through the budget process.
Okay, so the 2015 one will require future action.
Correct.
Any request that you're dealing with for additional funds for 14 does need approval now if we're going to allow that to happen. And we'll get back to the 14 in a minute, but the 2015, that's where you're requesting the 25,000.
Correct.
Okay, and in my mind, I right away go and I start doing the math. It's kind of what I do, and it comes up to about a 17% increase, which I thought was a little striking when we look at other areas. But in reading this, so it appears that these qualify for other funds that we can use to offset that cost. Am I correct, Rhonda?
Well, for 2015, it really is mostly supported by the levy, that request in 2015.
Okay.
The 2014 funds is supported by an allocation that we get called the Vulnerable Children and Adult Act funds, and that's your attachment C. And so what these funds are is at the beginning of, when we set the budget for calendar year 2014, you'll see the first page of attachment C, what Clay County's allocation was, the $1,226,049. And then after this last legislative session, we received a revised allocation, so that's the second attachment C. So in June, at the end of June, we received a revised allocation of $1,261,381. So that is additional revenue into the 2014 budget that we hadn't planned for. So it's about $35,000. So what I'm proposing.
How much are you proposing to add to the 14 budget?
$25,000.
Oh, the same amount.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So of that additional revenue, I'm proposing if we could increase their contract by $25,000 in 2014. That amount and what we had proposed for 2015 would be a good amount to try to get us on the right track with the contract and get some of these referrals made that we need to.
Would it be safe at all for us to assume that the revised allocation for 2014 could become our target for 2015?
No. Our 2015 allocation actually went down, and this is kind of the mystery of these formulas.
Right.
So in the 2015 budget, our starting allocation is $1,169,411. So it's actually over 56,000 reduction from the revised allocation. Now, in June of 2015, this may be revised again. The way the formula goes in the legislative session, this is a difficult allocation to predict. The monies are targeted for, just as the title says, vulnerable children and adults, and we're required to submit a plan on how we will use these funds. And it's really targeted to adult protection, child protection, and services that are aimed at those target areas. And the guardianship program does meet that qualification, so it would be an authorized service under this program. But the allocation is somewhat unpredictable. But for the 2015 budget, I did budget the reduced amount. So the way that's in
So
there.
it's in there with the reduced
It's
amount
in
of
there with the
revenue and
reduced.
the increase of the 25.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so I think for today, I think we're going to have to concentrate on your 14 request.
Okay.
And then we'll have to further discuss the 2015 issue. And it seems to me that with the additional revenues that have been coming in between the state and the federal, and those revenues were designed to help compensate this type of program, correct? So it would appear to me that we have more funds in terms of our updated allocation than the requested expense that you're asking us to implement, that it would be good for us to do this.
Yes, I believe it actually, I knew we had this issue, and when we got the revised allocation, it was like, okay, this is a perfect request, because these funds are targeted for this kind of service. It would be an authorized expense, so it made sense that we take this allocation that wasn't budgeted and we put it right into this program.
And this is kind of a crazy question, but what happens if counties don't use their full allotment of dollars?
We don't receive it then.
Does somebody else get it?
Well, I'm not so sure that it would go in. I think it just ends up in kind of the reserves at the state.
Okay.
I don't know, this would be an allocation that I think would be fairly easy for counties to spend, because out-of-home placements is a legitimate expense as well, and most
Okay,
counties.
so that's also qualifies
Yes,
for those dollars?
yeah, on the children's side, yeah. So most counties would
Right,
generally.
have we covered everything as far as you're
I
concerned?
think we've covered everything. I did include the statute reference in the board packet, just to provide the basis for our obligation in this program as well.
I'll move the $25,000 increase for 2014.
With the offset revenue? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. All right, so we're good for 14, and we've
Okay.
got a little work to do on 15.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
And Rhonda, you're going to stay here, and
Stay?
Sandy's going to join you.
Yes. See, is it just you and Roxanne? And Jenny. Looking for a big crowd.
Good morning.
Good morning, Sandy. Excuse me. Okay, now we have the discussion regarding the Father's Resource Program.
Okay.
And you're going to start this one, Linda?
Yes, okay, we are back to talk with you about the Father's Resource Program. We were here in, gosh, was it June? To talk a little bit about the request for the next year. And if you recall, the budget year for this program has been kind of odd. When we spoke in June, the budget request was for, I believe, September 1 of 2014 through August 31 of 2015. It was at that point, a doubling of the county contributions because there was a loss of some grant funds. You had some questions about what the other 11 counties were doing. There was some questions about approving perhaps a 4-month allocation and then getting this on a calendar year so it could be considered more thoughtfully in the budget process. Since that time, and then also Jenny and Sandy and Lori from the Father's Resource Project had presented to the library board, I think it was in June, because there was some indication that they were interested in this program and maybe we could receive some funds from the library board as well. That's the law library board. And they haven't acted on that request. I don't believe their next meeting is till in September. But so since that time, I did go back and worked with the 11 county project. All were in agreement that it would be best if this program was on a calendar year. So we did look at a 4-month budget for the rest of 2014 and then a calendar year budget for 2015. So I do have the increased amount in the 2015 budget, so that I assume would be considered in the budget process like our previous conversation. And today's request is for approval of the 4-month contract extension for September to December. I did confirm that 10 of the 11 counties have indicated commitment and approval. Douglas County has ended their relationship with the program, and Morrison County, it looks like, is interested in joining, but would not be looking at doing that until January of 2015 is my last understanding. So in the board information, I did, in the middle history part, I did provide, because I needed to put this down on paper even for myself, what our history of support has been for the program. So you can see we started in July of 2012, and so that first year, the net amount that we supported the program for was $4,339, and then $4,320 for the next year. The new request then for September to December of 2014 is the $3,224, and that's the new money that's being requested for 2014. And then the $9,347 is what I have in the 2015 budget proposal at this point. So the request today is for that $3,224. Questions? And then I provided the MOU that Ottertail County is the fiscal host, so Ottertail County actually pays Mahooty the full amount to operate the program. Ottertail County seeks the federal financial participation on that full grant amount, and then bills each of the 10 or 11 counties then their share. So when I say net amount, what I'm meaning is that after we've received federal participation in the program, because this is one of those programs paid out of the child support arena, and it's eligible for that between 60-66% FFP.
John?
I see that you do have funds to cover this into 2014 budget.
Right, I got a printout of expenditures year to date, and you know, there's some areas throughout that administrative where I could pull that $3,000 from to cover it in this 2014 contract period.
And for 15 in the budget, it's covered without increasing?
Yeah, for 15, I mean, I put the amount in the budget
Yeah.
proposal,
Yep.
and I have it listed on the contract sheet for your consideration for 2015.
In the budget proposal, you asked for $5,000 increase. Is that for the whole year then, or is that just the increase?
It's the increase amount. So I actually budgeted the $9,347, but what I was saying is it's a $5,000 increase from what's budgeted in 2014 to 2015.
$5,000 increase.
Yeah. But if you were to approve the $3,224 for this fourth quarter, it actually would be pretty much the same amount.
I noticed here, when we first started this deal, it looked like we had set this up for a fiscal 13-month period. So because we went from 7/1 to 8/31. And then the following year, we go from September to August, September 13th to August 14th. That's a fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're talking about, are we trying to roll this into more of a calendar year process? Is that what we're trying to do here?
Yes.
Because I see typically it's been an annual deal, now all of a sudden we're doing a short-term deal that goes from 9 to 12, and then in the future, so all counties are on board with wanting to be on a calendar year basis. Is that for the purpose of budgeting?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense, and I'm just wondering why they didn't do that to begin with.
You know, it was, they were receiving some grant funds that were on, they
Okay.
started on odd times as well, so I think that's why it was started in that way, but that's exactly what we're trying to do, is get it on a calendar year, so that,
Okay.
Yeah, I would move that we approve the funding for Clay County to participate in this at a cost of $3,223.80 for this September through December period, and that the funds are already found within the budget, current budget.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, the same, motion carried. All right, thank you, Rhonda.
okay, thank you.
Ron, I have one question. Yesterday, I got an email from Otter Tail County indicating that they got a major grant. Did you get that? It talked about partnership in a number of agencies, but it wasn't part of it didn't appear to be part of the four-county partnership, and I was wondering, you know
I'm
anything
not
about
sure.
that? Okay, I should have brought the,
Yeah.
but-
Who was the email from?
well, it came from the director there.
Okay.
So I was curious at why we got it when it wasn't, why I got that notice if it wasn't part of the four-county.
Well, I'm not sure.
I'll
I'm not sure. I'll
get
have
you
to
the
check my
details.
emails. Maybe I have that
Maybe you
one
have it
sitting
too,
there,
yeah.
and I'll be surprised when I get back.
I think Diane sent it. So.
Okay.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you, Sandy.
Thanks.
Well, we went from behind to ahead here. 915 item, section 218, social security coverage for para-correctional plan. Darren, good morning.
Later today.
We're back again to talk about this issue.
Yes, I'm not even getting asked for money, so.
That's nice.
Well, thanks for having me. As you know, last week I kind of gave you an update on where we were with this. And so just a very brief history of why we're here today. Back in 1999, the correctional plan was devised, and a lot of the people that were in the coordinated plan in the correctional arena were moved over to this correctional plan. Those that were in the coordinated plan back in 1999 and moved over to the correctional plan on July 1st, 1999, they had their Section 218 agreement come with them, and basically they were contributing to both para and the Social Security. And so fast forward to 2014, and when para asked for a review of this, the Social Security Administration said at this point the correctional officers shouldn't have been, the new correctional officers after 1999 should not have been included in the Section 218 agreement, thus they shouldn't have been paying into Social Security. And so the para people said that, or the Social Security said that they had to have a referendum and a vote by its members, and that vote will happen in December. As part of that, what they were asking the counties to do is to decide on what kind of vote they wanted to have, whether it be a majority vote or a divided vote. If it's a majority vote, then it's all or nothing, and if the majority vote is approved, then everything would stay the same. Currently, our correctional officers and juvenile detention secure people are contributing to Social Security. So if it's a majority vote and it comes out as positive or approved, then everything would stay the same. They would continue with their Social Security and their para contributions. If it is a voted down in a majority vote, then what will happen is that those people that were in the program prior to 1999 and switched over to the correctional plan, they will continue as they are right now because they are still covered under the Section 218 agreement. Anybody that was not that was hired after 1999 would then cease to contribute to the Social Security. Their Social Security dollars that they've already put in there will still be there, and they are allowed to get a refund of those dollars back 3 years, okay? So, and then, like I said, everybody then would cease to contribute to the Social Security. Under a divided vote, basically what happens is everybody would get to choose whether they wanted to contribute or not contribute. A couple of the counties that I've, through the HR channels already, some of them have already decided, and let me see here, I think most of them, and I think Parrott is also pushing for the majority vote. Redwood, Goodhue, and Beltran have already voted for the majority vote, and Nicollet and Freeborn are also considering, I don't know if they've voted yet, they may have by now. They were also considering the majority vote as well. All the para has to know from you today, the board today, is whether you would approve a majority vote or a divided vote. What will happen then is they would put out informational packets to the correctional officers and to the counties for the next 90 days to ask any questions. So from September, October, November is their 90 days that correctional officers either can come to us or call para or call Social Security if they have any questions about it, and find out, to answer any questions they may have. And then in the end of November, they will send out the ballots, and then the members will have the month of December to vote whether they want to go with the continuing contributions to the Social Security or not. It isn't a majority vote of those who voted. It's actually a majority vote who are eligible to vote, which means there's about 2,900 people that are eligible to vote. So you could even have 1,000 people who vote yes, and the proposal would still fail because you would still have 1,900 and a no vote, or a no vote. If they don't vote, it is considered a no vote. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Last week you asked me to meet and kind of let the correctional officers know what's going on with this, and we did have 2 sessions last week that we opened up to the correctional officers or anybody in the correctional para plan, and we also had one yesterday. And then I also brought in Julie and Justin and Steve and Troy last week after the board meeting to kind of bring them up to date on all of this as well. So that's kind of where we are with this. What I would request from you today would be whether the board would consider going to a majority vote or a divided vote when the members vote in December.
So Darren, if I can ask this question, because this is what I got of this before. If we chose the majority vote and they elected to vote that down, then they still have the ability to go with the divided vote. Is that correct? Or
No.
the other way around? It's the other way around. If
they go with the divided vote, then basically everybody gets to choose whether they want to contribute or not. If the majority vote is voted down, then nobody would contribute anymore except for, I believe, any new correctional officers that are hired.
Okay.
So, and that was a little bit of confusion when I heard that last week. It doesn't necessarily default to the divided vote.
John? Any idea what the staff prefers?
They didn't tell me what they prefer because I think they're still absorbing it like I was. But I know that para is kind of pushing for the majority vote. I did talk to the representative up at para, and they're going to be putting this out to the unions as well to educate them. And his feeling, and this is all it is a feeling, is that the union would also go with the majority vote preference. But this is just him letting me know there's no, I guess, facts behind it. So, and Brian, did you have something?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just just as of an email as of yesterday afternoon as well. I think there are some counties that are choosing not to offer their input. This is input to para. This is para's decision. So don't feel compelled that what the input that you give them, that's the way it's going to be. You're offering your input based on our county's desire.
Well, I would certainly like to offer input if I was,
Do which way you,
well,
that's right.
if I knew which way all of our
Yeah.
people wanted to go, that makes it a lot easier. We're kind of
Yeah,
guessing here on their behalf, because I don't see any reason why we wouldn't want to support
right.
what our members would want, you know.
And I sat in on all three of the sessions. I think Jennifer and I conducted the two last week, right, Darren?
Yep.
And Darren and I conducted the one yesterday. And I mentioned to them that the board would be making a recommendation or a suggestion, and we didn't know which way you were going to go, but we thought there might be an interest in going towards the mandatory. But we said, this is in your interest. It's going to go to you for a vote at the end, and the board would be very interested in knowing your wishes. So please contact us with observations or input. But that puts them, I mean, it doesn't really put them in an educated position to know which way is the best way to go. I think they got a sense of, I got a sense from them that they want to stay in the Social Security system. So
they'd vote majority.
I think they would, yes. That was my feeling. But we tried to be careful to educate and not to determine them. But so that's what we kind of indicated. We thought maybe you folks would be leaning towards as offering your input is on the mandatory. But
Is it, you know, when they do have votes on that kind of thing, or is it, do they get a good turnout? I mean, it takes a lot of, if not everybody's voting, it obviously takes a lot of votes to get, those are voting are gonna have to vote much heavier to compensate. And
Right, yeah.
I wonder, is it difficult to get people to go out and vote on those kind of things? Or?
Well, what they'll do is, and I don't know, I think they're still trying to figure out some of the voting practices, of
Okay.
how they're going to do it, but basically they'll send us the ballots.
In the
We'll
mail.
distribute them via either hand or mail, and then the person will vote the way they want to vote and then send that back to para. Now, I don't know if they send it directly back to para or if it comes through HR and then we send it. I'm not sure that's how that works yet. But
Well, wouldn't it benefit them to stay on the both of them? I mean, then you'd have two retirement systems then.
correct, yes, and that's what they're currently on. So,
Do they have, when they do retire, become eligible, is there an offset that you can't draw from two retirement systems? Because I know in government employees there is. Does the state have that too, where you can't draw off two pensions? I mean, like,
that I'm not
I mean, even though I
sure.
qualify for Social Security, I get a 3/4% off. My Social Security is reduced
Mhm.
because I have a government offset on pension.
I think Brian might want to try to answer that.
Yeah.
yeah, and Mr. Chair and Commissioners, we did discuss that quite a bit. And the first thing to Commissioners Everett's comment, what we did really stress to them is that they vote.
Yeah.
To let their voice be known, because if they don't vote, it comes back as a no vote. So we really stress to them, make sure you vote. It's your decision, you vote. On to the other issue. The correction plan only pays 1.9%. That's the multiplier times each year of service. The coordinated plan that the other employees are on, except for law enforcement and the correction officers, pays 1.75. So there's not a big deal, a difference in what pays out. Law enforcement pays 3% per year of service. When you talk about having two retirement systems, that 1.9 certainly doesn't measure up to the 3% that the deputies receive on retirement. So personally, I think it's important that they do have the dual. Now, if they're out of the Social Security system, if they don't have 20 years of substantial paying into, then they get a reduced benefit, like you're talking about. You've obviously paid into Social Security for a number of years, so you probably have the 20 years that requires, but then you take a reduction. So it is important that they stay within the system. Now, if they pay in for 30 years, then they do not receive a reduction. So, yes, I think the two systems are pretty darn important.
Yeah.
Because then there would be an issue of we're paying 6.1% into Social Security, meaning the county, and the employee is paying in 6.1%. That would drop off for the county, but you can betcha there would be then some negotiations as to what you're gonna do with that 6.12%, and that might take a few years to get to that point, so. Did that answer your question?
It'd be better for them to have another retirement system, especially when the
Right.
county's contributing
Right.
6%.
Well, I've never heard of them complaining the fact that they've had both those options in the past, and
No.
I think we might hear more complaints if we were to select the divided
Yes, you would.
than we would the other. But again, I don't know what they think, but
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve the majority method of voting in this case.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carried. All right, so that will go before. Thank you, Darren.
Very good, I'll let them know. Thank you.
Yep. We are 5 minutes ahead. I'm going to take just a quick 2-minute break here. All right, we'll reconvene our meeting here after the break, and we're going to go on to item number 5, which is the proposed agreement with the Enterprise Fleet Management in Georgia. Good morning.
Okay, Brian, Jenny, and I, we've met multiple times, both with Enterprise and just amongst ourselves to review their proposal. Several of the other counties have already partaken in the proposal with Enterprise to lease some of their fleet vehicles. Hope, Douglas, Washington, Chisago, those are some of the ones that have already participated, and I think Becker County is currently looking at it this week. And we thought it might be an opportunity for Clay County to try. I attached a current list of our fleet vehicles, and you'll note that some of them are getting up there both in years and in mileage. And then along with it, some of them have high repair bills. So as we look at replacing them slowly, each year we've been we don't have a set plan for replacing them, but we do look at high mileage and repairs, and we've been somewhat on a every 2-year plan to replace the vehicles. This plan may give us an opportunity to replace them more often at a more cost-effective price. With Enterprise, what they do is they'll lease us the vehicles, and the term of the lease can vary depending on the mileage needs. And then they will replace them probably about 50 to 60,000 miles, depending on the mileage and the repair. If there's a need to replace it earlier, they would. And that would give us an opportunity to keep our fleet more up to date than what we currently are. We were looking at replacing vehicle number 2 and 9, which is an Impala and both Impalas, but we would replace them, one with a Ford Fusion and then a Ford Taurus. The Ford Taurus would be going to the probation office, and they had a need for a little bit more of a mid-sized vehicle, and that's why the difference of the two vehicles. The Ford Fusion would be used as part of the fleet, which would mainly be 1 to 2 people traveling on a fairly regular basis. So we were proposing to enter into the lease agreement for the 2 vehicles and replacing number 2 and number 9. And I think the attachment was included for the lease agreements for those 2 vehicles. For a 50-month lease agreement on the one, or excuse me, on actually both of them, and then one was the up to 90,000 miles, one was 85. The Taurus, we weren't sure. We're trying to, the very first year or 2, we're going to have to try and get a handle. We know our mileage, but it does vary quite a bit, so the probation department, they put on a little bit more mileage than some of our regular Fleetwoods with their needs. So, and we will adjust the mileage as the lease goes on. If we find that we're going to run over the lease agreement, we would increase it or possibly decrease it on the same side.
And they allow you to do that?
Yes, especially in the beginning. Hopefully, if we do to continue to go on with the lease agreements, they will monitor it and work with us on the mileage so we can get as accurate as possible.
George? Go ahead, Frank. Go ahead.
Are all these vehicles paid for? Are we still paying some of these?
No, these are all purchased and paid for.
These are all purchased and paid for.
We purchase them out of our fleet replacement fund. and we purchased the majority of them, if not all. There's maybe one or two that we've inherited from other departments, but they originally still came from the state bid.
Okay, so they're all paid, all right,
So-
thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up on that question, Frank. And maybe Brian, you can help out on this too. So all of these fleet vehicles, at some point in time, I'm assuming they're in our internal service fund for replacement. Am I correct on that?
Yes. I don't know that all of them were, because a couple of them were purchased outright, and I'll say the Jeep Grand Cherokee, the 2005 that the assessor's office is now using, that was purchased for $5,500 out of the internal service fund, but two from highway. And I don't think that then has established a payment to replace it. And we have a couple of those. I think the higher mileage Chevy that is out at motor vehicle is the same way. That was purchased outright and probably doesn't have a replacement fee going in. But anyway, we did talk about the internal service fund. In fact, we had Lori weigh in on this as well. So.
Well, yeah, because that's something that I guess I'd like to know, because you know, the dollars that, so for example, the two vehicles that we're placing here, number 2 and number 9, they're both 09 vehicles. So there has to be dollars set aside in the internal service fund for those two vehicles. So what are those dollar amounts? What is the down payment on each of these vehicles as part? Typically when you enter a lease, you have a down payment, right? And I'm assuming that's going to be in here.
Mr. Chair, there is no down payment.
Okay, so there's no down payment. So the dollar amounts that we have in the internal service fund for these two vehicles, if we were to add those up and you take a look at the life of these based on monthly payments, what difference do we get? So can we talk about number A here, the Ford Taurus? So we're looking at how many month lease for that?
For the Ford Taurus, 50 months.
50 months. So if we were to take 50 times the 469.52, right? That would be our end price.
$20,000, a little more. Yeah.
Okay. So the question becomes is, what did we have in the internal service fund for that vehicle in comparison to the, I'm not saying that we should have it all there, but the fact of the matter is that the change from putting money into the internal service fund to fund the vehicle could then also just swap over to pay the lease portion.
Right.
Right?
My understanding, and I'd have to verify again with Lori, is anytime someone uses the vehicle, they charge them 35 cents a mile. So that's always ongoing into the fleet vehicle fund. If I were to drive the vehicle to go to St. Cloud, out of my budget, I'd have to pay that 35 cents a mile into the fleet. And that's how they generate that money. So it's always incurring additional revenue
So that goes
for the
into
usage.
the internal service fund.
It's
And
fun.
we would pay out of the internal service fund the lease, wouldn't we? I mean,
No. Yes, Mr. Chair. There is a monthly charge, or there is a miles charge. You're right on that. But of course, that covers gas and maintenance and
Okay.
repairs and everything else.
Right.
Only a portion of it goes back into the internal service fund.
I would assume the money they're paying is for the gas and the maintenance of it for while they're driving.
Well, and part of it, though, goes to the internal service
Okay.
fund for replacement as well. Yeah, and we not struggled with this, but that's why we met so many times, because we're in a unique position with the internal service fund is really good. One of the things that, if you notice though, under A, that 469.52 includes all maintenance and repairs. So we are managing our costs is what we're looking at. Some of these higher mileage vehicles, we'll have $1,500, $2,000 repair on them even before we can get rid of them. That's what we're kind of trying to avoid. That's why we're only going to 2 vehicles, because we're trying to be experimental with this. And frankly, we do not have a very good maintenance schedule and a tracking system of mileage, tracking system of expenses on the vehicles. And we feel, or they have sold us on the idea that they get reductions on upkeep and maintenance and scheduled events and things like that because they're such a high volume business. that we will hopefully enjoy some savings on this. So,
But
yeah.
then that's, Brian,
The
that's,
number 9 vehicles already had $8,000 worth of maintenance on it, it looks like.
but my point on this is trying to get a true comparison on what we're putting into this vehicle under our current system versus what we'd be putting into that system under this lease option. Because ultimately, how does that adjust to our fleet budget?
That's right.
And I haven't seen anything here that indicates whether it's more or less on the budget, and I'd like to have that number.
Right, Mr. Chair. And that is frankly what our system is lacking, is actually tracking the cost of each and every vehicle, what mileage they are. So I don't know that we have that information. The 35 cents that we charge for each mile goes in, and then it's divided up for the cost of the vehicle. But unfortunately, it gets kind of lumped together. What we're hoping to is establish, because if you'll notice in paragraph number 3 down there, there is also a $5 a month. We can put every one of our fleet vehicles, and we were hoping to do that, so that for $60 a year, they will have every dollar that goes into that vehicle. So then we'd be able to answer your question just to the penny of what that vehicle has cost us and things. What our hope is, and what our plan is that 35 cents that we continue to charge per mile on the vehicle, that will pay for the lease, it'll pay for the gas, and then we will be able to establish some track record so we could answer your question very accurately.
I would think you can answer it now.
Okay?
Well, you're saying how much money is in that account right now? And what-
And
if we're gonna be paying for it with the current 35 cents, then we don't need to use
No, we
the
will be
money in
using
the
the internal service fund.
fund
Yes.
for
right,
it.
but the internal service dollars, and again, you have to take a look at the whole budget picture each year. If there's still an active vehicle, there's so many dollars that go into a line item for that vehicle to invest into the internal service fund for its replacement. If that's no longer needed to go there, because now we have a built-in automatic replacement through a lease. Now, those dollars that are going into that lease now can be applied in a different manner, not necessarily to internal service money, because we won't only do vehicles.
That's correct.
But what we would be shifting the way we budget to, lease expense. And it seems to me, I mean, right now, you've got down here how much we're paying in maintenance on each of these vehicles. We should know how much money we have in internal service funds for each of these vehicles, and we should be able to get to the answer.
And I put it this way, I don't have that information today, but given some time, we will do that. I don't think we're paying into the internal service fund on each and every vehicle, because we've added a couple of vehicles. As I stated, an example of that is when we purchased that Grand Cherokee, and we added that to the fleet. That was purchased, and I don't believe there was a depreciated amount that was put into the internal service fund to replace that vehicle. But we can get you that information.
But that would even be more reason why I would want to know, because then all of a sudden, if we were going to switch all these and start leasing all of our fleet, we're going to have a whole new expenditure here.
Yeah, that isn't our intent. Our intent is just to try this. We like what we're seeing. We like the management system of it. That's why we went with 2 vehicles, and then putting these on the schedule. But why don't we, Mr. Chair, why don't we get to that information before you guys make a decision on this?
Can this wait a week?
You betcha.
I'd be happy to sit down and work with whoever wants to try to iron it out.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by this. I'm really glad that you're choosing a couple to try it on and find out how it works. And we do a lot of study on this. We should know if it's a good deal or bad deal for us. And I think it is different than most counties, because most counties don't have that internal service.
Right.
I'd be happy to, Georgia, if maybe you and I and if Brian, and we could get Lori and focus in on all these things, because ultimately, there's a lease is good in some ways, and sometimes buying is also good. So it's just a matter of what's our best affordable for us. And especially if there's, that lease looks really good with no maintenance to us, so.
Right. And I think, Mr. Chair, you guys need to know too, that this is an open-end lease. So the cost, and there's a little more of a risk with that, if the car brings in a good value upon trade-in, then it's favorable to us. But if it brings in a very low amount, it's going to cost us more into the next lease too. So it is an open-end lease. It can work to our advantage or it can work to our disadvantage. It's not a closed-end lease. And I think that was an important, we spent quite a bit of time on that discussion too. So, but yes, we'll get you those answers and we'll meet with you on this.
I might have some time early Friday afternoon if you're
Great.
around.
Yep.
Look at that one. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Durga. Okay, let's see, we had this, we had that one agenda item had a time on it for, was there a reason why that time on that one?
Larry's going to be here.
Oh, Larry's here, Larry is here. Why don't we go ahead and take Larry's issue here?
Diane's here too.
Oh, Diane's here too. Well, Diane, I saw you walk in first, so maybe we better take you first. Diane, come on up, we'll take care of your agenda addition. You had a resignation.
I have, yes. Thank you.
Well, good morning.
Putting it on the agenda. Good morning. So one of the deputy recorders has submitted a resignation, and I'm requesting permission to fill the position. There's money in the 2014 budget for this position, and it's been budgeted for 2015. The savings is $3,029 for 14.
It's based on different, coming in at a different level.
Right, different level. Yeah, same grade, but different level.
I'll move to approve.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Thank
same.
you. Short and sweet.
Easy done.
Yep.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
Larry, come on up. Where's Kirk today?
On vacation.
Yes.
Gone fishing.
I was going to say he's on it's an annual fishing trip.
Oh.
And the reason why this is moved up without him being present is that Dave Overbo has worked with Larry and Kirk in regards to refining the bid specs and reviewed them with Jenny from a legality standpoint, because we did have 3 bids on it. And Celine Brothers said that they had checked on the time to order the scale, and it's 4 to 6 weeks to get it, and they want this in this fall. They felt a week was relevant, so that's why we wanted to move forward and add it today. We just added it yesterday when we got that feedback. And you'll recall that last week the bids were open. There were 3 bids. There was one lower bid as the Kennedy scale, and they had not, it was, the electrical had not been included in the bid price. And
Jenny, you did review that bid too?
Yeah, we met right after the board meeting last week, and then Dave and I met yesterday just to confirm. We kind of went through, the checklist. Were the bid bonds included? Were the addendums acknowledged? And everyone did do those things. But Kennedy Scales, which appeared to be the low bidder, was lacking a quote on the electrical, and in fact they had a little asterisk on their bid that said essentially electrical would have to be done, we would have to find our own electrical. So I deemed that did not conform with the proposal, so then therefore their bid was not a complete bid, and we shouldn't consider that one. So that leaves us to the next lowest number, which would be Celine Brothers, and we looked over that and found that was a complete bid and then would qualify as our legitimate low bidder in this situation.
Very good, thank you.
And I see, Mr. Chair, that Dave Overbo, our engineer, is attending right now.
Yeah, he do.
And he is. I mean, they do so much with bids that we were pretty comfortable in them helping out solid waste and reviewing this.
All right, so Dave, would you concur with the bid process and the selection of?
Yeah, we went through everything, all the addendums were acknowledged, the bid bonds were all there. One bid was incomplete, but the low bid was actually a good bid.
Thank you.
I'll move to accept the Sullivan Brothers bid of $155,050.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
No.
So that's not very obvious. You come up here, you didn't have to say one word.
That's good.
Huh?
That means I'm doing a good job.
Is the site all ready for this?
Well, we're prepping, we're expecting more concrete to be coming in from the Moorhead power plant.
Are you getting some now?
We had gotten some,
Okay.
but now we're waiting for the contaminated material to come in, and we have to get approval from MPCA before we can take that material in. So as soon as we get the approval from MPCA, then we'll be moving ahead with that.
Sounds good.
Site
Thanks, Mike.
preparation is going on.
Very good.
Thanks.
All right, Brian. 2015 budget discussion. Is Lori going to come up here?
You know, Mr. Chair, I received an email from Lori yesterday afternoon. She had some issues that came up with her, personal issues that came up, and she
Okay.
apologized, but she cannot be here
All right.
today. So, and because of that too, I'm not absolutely sure on what was entered into some of these. I'm positive on many of them, but we'll talk about in abstract, I guess, and get a sense of where you guys want to go with some of these, because some have been included and some have not, depending upon what we feel your guys' wishes are and what direction you give us on these. But maybe what we want to do, you've got some information there handed out, but maybe I can go over the new request form that we had passed out earlier on, and we can touch base with you on that. We have met with most of the people that had submitted new requests and talked about the goals for the budgets, and if we want to just run through that, we can tell you what it was and why it was eliminated at the request of the department that had submitted it, and we thought you would be okay with that. The assessor's office, Nancy had originally put $20,000 in there for preparation for a tax court. We really don't know what tax courts are going to go forward, or if they're going to settle or whatever. So as in the past, we said, you know, a tax court is a tax court. It might cost $10,000, might cost $40,000 to defend the action. And to start budgeting for that rather than taking reserves, we didn't feel that was necessary. So she said no. She knows she has the support of the board in going forward with those things. Personnel, I know Darren was in and presented this, and he felt that, yes, the software would be beneficial, and that some employees would use it for the information, and it may help their workload, but under the circumstances, this may not be the good year to implement that new software, and would be removing that request. Technology services, you had given them or authorized them an additional person 2 years ago, I remember, when the sheriff's office came in and IT came in asking for that additional person. And he just wanted the board to know that there was a need, they have requests, but he said as long as we get on the radar so that they know there is a need, we're okay and not going forward with that this year. They were asking for an additional $20,000 in internal service, and he's certainly is willing to reduce his request to $10,000 for internal service increase. The additional $20,000 in other equipment, he feels they're kind of slipping behind on some of this additional equipment, but he felt that was maybe not a need, but a desire, a request to increase that amount. So he feels if he gets the $10,000 in the internal service fund increase, that would be sufficient. Information services, the part-time help, you just increased Cindy's position. That was a .82010. So during the year last year, you increased that position from .8 to .1 that we reminded him of, and he said yes, he appreciated that. So he didn't feel that the need for the request of the $6,000 was there. The computer software, he was going to make some upgrades on some things that he felt that would have been nice to have, but he didn't feel that they needed them at this time. The other professional services, $20,000 were requested, but 10 of that was for the upgrade in the homepage that took place last year. There's going to be a $10,000 fee, and he talked about that, remember, during that time. So that is I'll say a necessity, that is going to be increased. We'd have to find other funds, but that has to be paid if we're going to keep that home base page up. So his request was reduced to the $10,000. County attorneys had the one FTE. We have not met with him. We're scheduled this afternoon or tomorrow afternoon? Today. Meeting with Brian this afternoon to talk about, the copier. We might want to look at that, and we'll discuss the priorities of the board and see what his wishes are to make a request to you. So we have not met with him on that yet. Grounds and buildings, they added the $23,000 for a vehicle. There is money in the internal service fund. He is going to be coming in asking for the purchase of a used vehicle and also a new vehicle, and he has money in internal service funds for that. That goes back to the discussion we just had a few minutes ago, and he was unaware of that, so that's been eliminated. Planning and zoning, we had put $25,000 in there for comprehensive plan. I think we talked about that because MetroCog had offered to do the comprehensive plan and split it 50-50, and now we know that is going through a transition with Wade leaving, and if that was to go forward in a year or two or three or whatever, you could utilize reserves to match that. We don't know if the match offer will be available in the future or what, but we didn't feel it was a year to be budgeting $25,000 when we aren't sure when this is going to happen. But you will need to update your comprehensive plan within the next few years. We were just going to start planning for it and setting money aside, which is a good idea, but also your reserves could handle that if you had to. So, also after a meeting with the Sheriff's Department, they eliminated their request for the additional part-time hours of $3,800, and the same with Emergency Management Services. And he talked about he wanted to extend that class that they were giving, and I think they feel they could probably do that through the means that they have. So some things there. And as you see, Family Service Center was $12,000. That was a request for tables and chairs for the lobby over there. And I don't know, she just didn't feel that that was necessarily a need this year. Some new furniture is needed over there, but we'll get a better handle on the Family Service Center. I mean, we're putting in the elevator that's going to be charged to the Family Service Center, and we just need to get a better handle on that before we start updating. We've done a lot of updates in that place.
Yeah, we don't want to take this off the future list, though. We know we need
no,
this.
Needs to be on there.
Chairs are pretty
yeah.
shabby. So.
Yeah, they are. Yep. Yeah, they are. So, as of right now, we've not whittled down this. This is the request of the departments. Have been very supportive in doing that. So, and then there's some other. I mean, you can see where we're at in the budget process. I mean, it's we feel it's starting to get closer to a range that you folks would be willing to accept, or the public would be willing to accept, but we still have a ways to go. When we met with juvenile detention, there was some duplication. They had included the 2% raise in theirs, and we have it in ours. They had included some health insurance benefits of a 7% increase. The increase is 13%, but that has been considered in the mass amounts. That hasn't been broken down yet. We'll get that figured out. A couple other things to get some sense of where you folks want to go. I know we have budgeted a couple years. We've budgeted for FM studies when we have some different needs and studies within the Fargo-Moorhead area, water projects and different things, we've used that. Well, we don't know what that is going to be. It's nice to have those dollars in reserves to do that, but if you do approve something, you can certainly go to your reserves if you feel your reserves are adequate to do that, rather than looking at percentages. And that was $95,000. It was under the FM study, if you noticed in your budget. That's something for your consideration.
It seems to me there hasn't been a request for it. It seems to me that that's something that to help benefit this project, that could be taken out, and then if a request were to come up, we could
go from there.
We could look at reserves if need
Yeah.
be, and it would have to depend on what the request is for.
That's right. Yeah. That's
What, yeah, I'm not.
Well, that was when we were funding portion of the diversion project study. Remember, we had shared 95,000 with this, and then the city had 95,000, I think, or
it was split between us and
Yeah.
the city, and the city doesn't budget for it either because we don't know the unknown.
And there hasn't even been any request for
No, there
more
hasn't.
study dollars, and that's all
That's
our
right.
dollars were the study dollars. And
That's exactly right.
so I would say that could be,
Okay.
for now, could be pulled.
Okay, the other thing for your discussion, and you don't have this in front of you, this is just some notes of mine, is that we have in the budget $150,000 for the housing rebates. And I know you know about that, you approved that program a couple of years ago. But again, if we're looking at 1 or 2 year time costs that are undetermined, it might be something that, rather than say funding the budget out of reserves, that might be something you want to say, well, we don't exactly know what those housing rebates are. They're building for the future, so even if we take that money out of reserve, those now are going to go on the tax roll in a couple of years and maybe help out the reserve. Just food for thought on it. And that's $150,000 that's in here.
That's the anticipated based on new construction?
That's correct. That's correct. The other...
That's not such a bad thing, though. We've got new construction going on.
That's a very good
Right.
thing.
Absolutely.
That's very wise to make that investment into the new construction.
And there's a lot of new construction.
There's a
It
lot
is.
of new construction.
Yep.
I drive down Highway 10, and I look at Hawley, and you go to Barnesville, and
Yeah.
all these areas.
But in
there.
Moorhead, too, there's a
Moorhead
whole lot
is-
more than I thought there was when I started
Yeah.
walking
Yeah,
around. So.
there's a tremendous amount.
And even if your reserves take a little bit of a hit of $150,000 this year, and then you're building that base for the next couple of years, that's something for you to think about. That would help certainly the budget picture if you want to go there. And, you know, a few years ago, you would set aside $50,000 for unanticipated. You reduced that to 25, and, you know, the long and the short of it is, your reserves are your unanticipated.
Right.
You can go to those anytime you want. If you want a budget for the 25, that's fine. If you don't, I think that's fine as well. But something for you to think about in regards to it. It's in there right now. And I actually got some good news yesterday. We have to make sure this is accurate information, but MCIT sent us out our preliminary figures for our 2015 I don't want to say premiums because it's not insurance, our fees for our contribution, that's what it's called, a contribution. And it looks like our contribution request might be down to the tune of about $100,000, maybe $130,000 less. That's going to really help it if we can
But
reduce.
that and all these other things that could.
That's right, yeah, that's in there right now. So the other thing that we'll be talking, we meet with Public Health Wednesday, I think it is. Yeah, Wednesday afternoon. But I've already discussed this a little bit with Kathy, and of course it's your guys' decision, but you'll see on your the longer sheet that under Public Health that there was $112,941 that was revenues over expenditures for 2013. In the past, you've rolled that into buying down the levy.
Have we rolled it all, or just a portion of it?
All.
Yep.
Yeah, in the past. So if that holds true to form, that could help the picture as well. So if there is 130,000 or 13,000 in public health, if there is 130,000 in the that MCIT, if we look at the housing rebates and things, we can make some progress on this next week as well. So, and then the choices are going to get more difficult.
Well, Brian, then too, if I'm reading this right here, it does look like our revenues over expenditures for the juvenile detention now, is that all secure, or is that including non-secure?
I think that is total.
Okay, so we'd have to figure out what portion of the...
It's 1/3 and 2/3
Okay, so 2/3 is secure.
is secure.
So of that, 2/3 of that 212, there's a standing agreement that states that that regional group will pay back 25% of the amount over to reimburse us for that
Right.
one time. It was originally 180,000 or something like that. And
Yeah.
so we could potentially see, put $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 coming back to us in that regard for Clay County.
Yeah, you could, Mr. Chair, but I think Steve has already rolled in the 2/3 amount into some of it as to a buy down of the bed space.
Yeah, but
25 or 35.
He's supposed to do that after he takes out that 25%.
Yeah, yes. But I think it would come off the amount of reserves. Yes.
And then we have to take into consideration some potential things that could happen here in 2015 in that particular facility
Oh,
too,
yes.
where
Mhm.
major revenues could come in, which obviously would be shared with all of our member counties, but it could also save all of our member counties, including Clay County,
That's right.
some significant dollars in the 2015 budget if we wanted to do that. So I'm just throwing some other things out there that, we might want to figure in and plan in to help reducing this down.
Right. Yep.
So I'm giving you a little bit of
No, that's what we
advice on
want.
places to look.
That's what we want. That's what we want.
Mr. Chair, I'm impressed with the fund balances. I think we've had increases generally across the board there that have been very significant. This total at the end, the 48 million, does that include the 5 million? It's other, it comes first, and then it says, and then other funds after that. Do you know if that's?
I would have to say, since it comes after that, I don't know what all those other funds are. I think they may be what's being held in bonding money and different things. So, no, I don't think they would be included in the, I think I'm safe to say that it's not included in the 48. Because I've asked about that before, where those monies come from.
When we look at this, and this is the line item that I've always had interest in, because it really, to me, it tells us the true picture of how our previous year levy went to what actually happened. And in the general fund, we had expenditures
Over revenues.
Over revenues of 608. And what was the big deal there? What caused that?
And I looked at that late yesterday afternoon, and I thought Kevin's going to ask me that question. I'm going to have the exact answer for you.
I'm sure you will. Because I would really like to know.
Yes,
and we can look at, and maybe when I come in Friday, if you want, we can look at it. But if there's some anomaly there that caused that.
Yeah. I thought, immediately, I thought it was the money we had paid out for the flood buyouts, and that was reimbursement dollars, but not necessarily. That may be some of our county contributions to the flood buyouts. Remember, we paid a lot of money in that. But then we got 87.5% back.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be that much money.
It shouldn't, no, shouldn't even be close to that. So I will definitely find you the reason for that.
Okay. And then going over to the road and bridge here, and that number is kind of a hit and miss number because of the way revenues comes in versus when things are paid, and the way Lori is required by law to put the revenues. And so where this shows $1.9 million expenditures over revenues, that's kind of a misnomer there too, because it's an accounting function that requires us to report things. There's revenue that's going to come in that's going to offset that 1.9 million, right, Dave? Correct. So So when we go over and we look over at the total package where we have 1.5 million negative expenditures over revenues, once you, huh?
A lot of it could be there.
Once you square away the highway department's reimbursement, that switches and goes from revenues or expenditures over revenues to revenues over expenditures.
Yes. Yes.
And, so I think overall, everybody did a good job for the year in 2013, and here we are talking, it's August now, we're talking about the final numbers for 13, but it's those numbers that can help us. I've used the argument all along that if we have $500,000 to $2 million in revenues over expenditures, why do we need to be increasing our tax levy when we continuously just put some of it in the bank? Why don't we just let our residents spend it on the economy? But I think we're making progress.
Yes.
Quite frankly, I think these percentages are still high.
Oh, yes, they are still high.
For revenue over.
No, I'm talking about these.
Oh, there, yes, yeah.
Yeah,
So
we know that.
We got some work to do. But you've been doing well on it, Brian. And
we will make progress this next week.
But you haven't, a lot of the things you listed here, you haven't included in here.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
We wanted to get your feedback on where do you want to go with this, because we don't want to bring things in here. I mean, you guys have to make the decision on it, but if we get a sense of where you want to go, that really helps us, and hopefully it helps you in coming up with some ideas and things too. So we know you're willing to take a little of that reserve or take some risks, and when you have the reserves money available to, the housing rebates, the study area, the assessing, that's a little bit of a gamble whether it's going to happen or not. So, and that's why you have the reserves. So.
And those reserves have been built up to where they're strong.
They're strong. They're comfortable. Mm-hmm. I know that
Right.
the state auditors would like them a little more.
But you know what? Yeah, but I'll argue with them till the cows come home. So
that's right. You guys make that decision. So.
All right. Let's move on to our committee reports. We'll start with you, Grant, today, if you want to start.
Let's see, I had regional radio board last week, and we had that discussion at our meeting last week about migrating to the armor system in Minnesota, and the radio board voted to approve Clay County moving forward with that and seeking the grant funds to assist us with that. So that went well last week. Let's see, yesterday I had the Area Agency on Aging in Fergus Falls, and just kind of seeing that we're on track for this year, and everything is financially, everything's going well, so everything's all the programs for the elderly are moving along just fine. So that was it for me for the week.
One question for Fred. When are they doing the bidding again for the meals?
Well, it'll start this fall, and they can be approved next year. So.
Okay. I had last year after last week after the meeting, I did go over and to the lobby of the Family Service Center, and the 4-H all of extension programs were on display, and 4-H was there. It was interesting mini fair, they called it, and there was livestock there that some of the kids had, and some very wise young people who were giving us instruction on animal husbandry that was rather interesting. And plus a number of other projects and so on that they demonstrated. I thought it was a really good event, and I thought it was a good idea that they did that there to hopefully get people in to see more about extension. There was the Diversion Authority Ag Committee met last Tuesday evening in West Fargo, and they talked considerably about again, the compensation to farmers who would be negatively affected by the diversion project, and the discussion of whether providing crop insurance to the farmers in the years when the federal crop insurance would not benefit them because of the man-made diversion flood. And whether or not that would reduce, if that was provided, whether that would reduce the flowage easements costs. At this point, preliminary, the Corps of Engineers said it would not change it, but we decided to go with recommend a study to determine that as to whether or not there would be a decrease in the flowage easements if there was crop insurance paid for the operators. So that's something that hopefully we'll get some answers for that'll help in that decision making. On Wednesday, I attended the tour. The commissioner of DNR was here to look at all of the Moorhead flood projects that they've completed, the dikes and the flood walls and everything. And very interesting. There was a bus full of people, many DNR people, who were here to see what Moorhead has already accomplished with flood protection, and Oakport as well. We toured Oakport as well. So hopefully the rest of the funds for Oakport can be allocated next year, so that project can be completed. Moorhead has already the allocation that should take care of just about all of their needs to the current level, and I think that would provide flood protection to 43 feet, I believe. And but it's and they will be finishing that up next year in 2015 with the money that's been allocated now. So it was a very interesting study. Thursday we had land management meeting for the diversion, and pretty much routine stuff. We had to ask a lot of questions about the things like cemeteries and how they're going to be affected, and some other issues with land effects and buyouts and so on. And there's a lot of questions that aren't being able to be answered yet. So there's a lot of gap in what people are needing to know and what answers are available. So we're hoping that gets remedied soon. I was going to attend and wasn't able to get to the clean water meetings that were at the Marriott on Sunday night and Monday, and I did not get there, but I understand it was pretty poor turnout, and there wasn't anybody from Clay County there, or commissioners there. Wilkin County commissioners were there, but none of us made it. So that's all.
Frank.
Tuesday, I was at the 4-H fair too, and I guess John pretty much covered that. It was a good presentation. Wednesday, I met with the FMCOG director. I guess we've all heard that Wade Klein, CEO there, is going to resign as of September 30th, and so we met with him on that. Wednesday night, I went to the Hitterdall community event. Thursday, the Canvas Board met here, and we approved the voting for primary. Went to health that afternoon. I went to health pitch for Family Health Care, held a health pitch where vendors came in and showed their new ideas for health services, new idea how they can, new inventions, I guess, and new planning, whatever they can do. So there's around, I don't know, 12, 15 guys that presented their new ideas. Then I went to Soil and Water Conservation District, discussed budget some more, and we also discussed the projects on County Road 86, and they really appreciated Dave for your work on that, their help with that. They appreciate your cooperation and getting those roads functional again and getting the culverts covered up, so we're happy with that cooperation. On Friday morning, we had that proclamation we signed with Dilworth, Moorhead, Clay County. That's same as that's Save and Sober thing that they're doing this year. It's called TCD this year. did that one. Let's see, what else did I do yet? Oh, Monday, we had an FM COG meeting, executive meeting. We went through the recruitment process that we're planning on doing to get a new CEO there, and other business as far as we're also looking to hire our principal planner, GIS specialist, so we got 2 hirings to do there, so that's what executive committee did yesterday, so that's it.
Okay. Yeah, the only meeting I have to report on for last week would be the diversion meeting that John talked about, and he mentioned in the land management committee was working on all of these issues dealing with the flowage easements and would they get compensated, how they would be paid, and what the Diversion Authority Board did do is they did vote to send out RFQs, request for qualifications for firms who can ultimately research this and come up to those decisions that these people are looking for in terms of answers. And it's certainly the intent of the Diversion Authority that when crops are damaged, there's got to be a process in place that there would be appropriate compensation for them. So that's just an ongoing, and it's a very complicated issue, as John knows more than I do because he serves on that land management committee. But it's a significant process, and we really hope we can get that resolved. There was some discussion, I know, on the North Dakota side. They have done some funding within themselves with their sales tax collections from both the city and the county come in at different times based on the funding levels that North Dakota is spending on this project, primarily due to the Oxen-Hickson-Baki project. So they've kind of worked out arrangements for a note to be paid back with sales taxes. I believe that's where most of that money is going. Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. And then we did have some discussion, the Corps of Engineers was there, and there was a lot of discussion about the impacts and environmental impacts associated with the Oxbow-Hickey-Baki project, and if it were a standalone project, the Corps basically said that the impacts to the Minnesota side would be insignificant. I think they referred to to less than an inch of water that could be pushed to the Minnesota side, which in essence would say that with that project all by itself, there would be no environmental impacts to the Minnesota side. That's not to say that the bigger picture with the diversion in place, that's still yet to be determined, and that's where the major study is going on right now with the EIS is once the whole process is in place, what are the environmental impacts to the state of Minnesota, and that answer will hopefully come out sometime next summer. So. Brian.
Yes, Mr. Chair, you're right on that funding source, and that was a $50 million note that they took out to cover the expenditures. A few things that were going on last week. Of course, we had several budget meetings with departments. We had a meeting with on the reference the GASB 45 valuation of health care costs, and you've gone through that before, so you kind of know. They're talking about the funding source if a retired person, which is a higher health premium risk, is part of our health system. What does that do to our health system? What kind of liabilities are created? Now, as has been pointed out in the past, that's all figured into the premium that we pay for it. So it is being funded. It's just that they are required by the legislature to evaluate what that would cost us, I suppose, if everything stopped. So we had that for about an hour last week as well. The para meetings, we talked about the correction staff. You just addressed that, had 3 meetings with those. Public affairs, Thursday morning it was our public affairs meeting at the chamber, and it was kind of an interesting presentation. The president of North Dakota State School of Science addressed the group in regards for support they're going to the legislature to ask for a $65 million addition to their Fargo campus. They've been in Fargo, this is the State School at Wapanan, has been in Fargo for 18 years. They're up by the NDSU campus. They're going to the legislature of North Dakota for a $65 million expansion of that. Now, why is that important to Minnesota? As he pointed out, this region needs skilled labor and needs a lot of skilled labor. And so something that's being built in Fargo or Fargo-Moorhead area is very valuable to the campuses and the culture over here in construction. So there was a motion by the Public Affairs Committee to support this legislative action going forward by the whole chamber. So it was very interesting and went into all of the different trades and the shortages of the trades and what's needed from IT to welding to on and on and on. So, and that's what they specialize in, of course, is the 2-year degrees. So it was very, very interesting. We told them if you're having trouble getting land in North Dakota that we probably could help them out in Moorhead and Dilworth, but they come along with that. So, had the land management meeting with the diversion that's already been discussed and then the diversion meeting itself. Of course, dealing continue with personnel issues come up on occasion. And Dave has volunteered to accompany me to Crookston tonight for an arts meeting, and that's not necessarily the board meeting. That's to work out some of the finances, and hopefully we're going to meet with the administrator from the arts board to work out the finances and a path forward in regards to that. So we'll be up there tonight.
Is that it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. And one last thing here, we got this notice from the Fargo-Moorhead Area Foundation regarding the $10,000 for veterans offices for both Cass and Clay counties. So I'm assuming this has been forwarded to Tom.
Tom.
It looks like they have ways where they can tap into those resources for our veterans. So that's another good thing. All right, nothing else. We'll be adjourned.